Stop wasting your next 4,000 weeks. The shock that time is finite. If you live to around 80, that's about 4,000 weeks. That's it. 4,000 tiny blocks of time that carry your entire life inside them. Your career, your relationships, your dreams, your moments of joy, and all the ordinary Tuesdays in between. 4,000 sounds like a big number, right? But then you realize that if you're 25, you've already used up more than 1,300 of them. You have fewer than 3,000 weeks left to do everything you said you'd do someday. Suddenly, time stops feeling infinite. It starts feeling terrifyingly real. I remember this exact realization hitting me on what I now call the Urgency Treadmill, a morning when the to-do list looked endless and none of it felt meaningful. I was running hard, answering every ping, checking every box, convincing myself I was progressing when really I was just keeping up appearances. That's when the number 4,000 stopped being abstract. It became a countdown, a finite measure of how long I had to step off the treadmill and actually build something that mattered. Most of us move through life as if the supply of weeks is endless. We scroll, multitask, make to-do lists that never end, tell ourselves we'll start the important stuff later. We confuse being busy with being purposeful because that's what everyone around us does. We measure our worth by how many boxes we tick off in a day, not by whether those boxes actually move our lives in the direction we care about. It's like we're sprinting up a down escalator, exhausted, but not actually going anywhere. And when we finally pause, even for a second, that's when it hits us. The feeling that we're drowning in tasks but starving for meaning. That tension is everywhere, especially for high achievers. You've got ambitions, side projects, responsibilities, and this quiet fear that if you slow down, you'll lose momentum. So you keep saying yes. You chase urgency instead of importance. And even though you're constantly moving, you feel strangely stuck. It's not your fault. Your brain is wired to crave urgency. It rewards you for reacting to pings, deadlines, and red notification dots. Every time you clear an email or finish a small task, you get a dopamine hit that says, "Good job, you're productive." But the truth is, that high only lasts a few seconds. The deeper part of you, the part that wants to create, to love, to grow, keeps waiting for its turn. A turn that never comes because there's always something more urgent shouting for your attention. So here's the real shock. Your 4,000 weeks are not a giant countdown clock somewhere in the distance. They're happening right now, this second, as you watch this video. Each minute that passes isn't just gone, it's spent. And the way you spend it shapes the future you'll get. The question is whether those weeks will be filled with autopilot busyness or with choices that actually matter. This isn't another productivity hack or time management trick. Those might make your calendar look cleaner, but they won't make your life feel fuller. This video is about something deeper, a complete shift in how you think about time, ambition, and purpose. A system that helps you stop reacting and start directing, turning every week into an intentional investment in the life you actually want to live. By the end of this, you'll have a framework to decide what truly deserves your attention and what doesn't. You'll learn how to recognize the psychological traps that steal your time without you noticing, and how to replace them with rhythms that protect your clarity, energy, and ambition. You can't buy more time, but you can reclaim the time you already have. Ready? Because your next 4,000 weeks start right now. Section 1, the urgency trap, why busy feels productive. Let's start with something that feels uncomfortably familiar, that tiny thrill you get from checking something off your list. You know that rush, the little yes moment when you hit send on an email or drag a task into the done column. It feels productive, satisfying, even virtuous. But here's the trap. Most of those micro-victories don't actually move your life forward. They just keep you busy enough to feel like you're winning, even when you're not scoring any real points. Psychologists call this the urgency effect, our tendency to prioritize whatever screams now over what quietly matters most. It's part survival instinct, part dopamine addiction. Your brain rewards you for handling immediate problems because in ancient times, reacting fast kept you alive. But in modern life, the predators are notifications, emails, and endless pings disguised as opportunity. Every alert whispers, "This can't wait," and before you know it, the day's gone, your energy's gone, and your meaningful goals are still untouched. Here's the lie urgency tells us. If you just get through this week, answer these messages, attend these meetings, crush this list, then you'll finally have space to work on the things you care about. The book idea, the fitness habit, the course you wanted to build. But that space never actually appears because new urgent things fill it instantly. Urgency multiplies, importance weights. The Eisenhower matrix makes this painfully clear. Picture 4 boxes, one for what's urgent and important, things like real deadlines, emergencies, commitments you must meet. Another for important but not urgent, the long-term work that actually shapes your future. Then there's urgent but not important, emails, instant messages, busy work that feels necessary but won't matter a month from now. The last box is neither urgent nor important. The scrolling, the drifting, the filler activities that steal your attention under the disguise of downtime. Most of us live in the first and third boxes, swinging between crisis mode and reactive maintenance, rarely touching the second box, the one that decides what our life becomes. And the reason is chemical. Every time we tackle something urgent, send a message, solve a tiny problem, we get a jolt of dopamine, the brain's quick reward signal. It feels amazing for about 20 seconds. Then we crave the next hit. This is why checking notifications feels like progress. Your brain literally rewards reactivity. But that same loop steals the patience required for deeper, slower progress, the kind that never announces itself but quietly transforms you over months and years. I remember when I learned this the hard way. I used to measure my days by how much I could check off. I'd look at a page of tick marks and feel accomplished until I realized that none of them were connected to my bigger dreams. I'd answer emails at midnight, reorganize my digital folders, tweak templates for projects that didn't even matter. It all looked productive from the outside, but inside I was exhausted and strangely hollow. I was mistaking motion for meaning. One day, a friend asked me a question I couldn't shake. If you kept living the way you did this week, what kind of life would that build? I didn't like the answer. That week built a life of constant reaction. And that's what most of us are stuck in, perpetual response mode. We work hard to look accomplished instead of being intentional. We're busy creating proof that we're doing something instead of results that make us proud. The urgency trap thrives on a specific illusion that being busy means being valuable. In achievement-driven cultures, stillness feels like laziness, so we fill every gap. When you're always in motion, you never have to face the discomfort of asking if your actions are meaningful. Busyness becomes a socially acceptable shield against self-reflection. But here's the quiet truth. Busyness without direction is a sophisticated form of avoidance. It looks heroic, but it's actually fear in disguise. Fear of slowing down long enough to see the bigger picture. Fear of realizing that you've been running the same loop for years. We cling to urgency because it feels safer than uncertainty. If we admit that some of our effort isn't meaningful, we have to change, and that's terrifying. Breaking this pattern starts with awareness. The next time you feel that impulse to rush into another small task just to feel productive, stop and ask, am I choosing this because it's important or because it's easy to finish? That single question interrupts the dopamine loop. It forces your prefrontal cortex, the rational planner, to take the wheel back from your lizard brain. You achieve in minutes what most people ignore for decades: choice in how you spend your time. So how do we shift toward the important things? Start by protecting small blocks of time for non-urgent priorities, the projects that matter even without a deadline. Treat them as sacred appointments. No multitasking, no toggling between tabs, no guilty glances at your inbox. At first, it feels uncomfortable, almost rebellious. But over time, it becomes the rhythm of meaningful work. This is the first element of the broader lifestyle framework, a system of weekly design that treats intention as the foundation of purpose. Every decision to step off the urgency treadmill is a practice in conscious time allocation, the muscle that will power every other part of your 4,000-week life. And don't expect anyone else to make this easier. The world profits from your distraction. Every platform, every app, every system around you is optimized to keep you attending to the urgent. You are surrounded by urgency machines. The only resistance is intentional design, deciding what gets your focus before the world decides for you. Because once you realize that your weeks are finite, urgency loses its glamour. Responding faster no longer looks like progress, it looks like voluntary erosion. The rush that feels productive today becomes regret tomorrow. When you notice that the important things never got the uninterrupted attention, they needed to grow. So pause right now and think about what's in your urgency loop this week. How many of those tasks will matter in 5 years? How many are just noise you're confusing for momentum? When you stop equating motion with progress, you get something far more powerful than productivity. You get clarity, And that clarity is what starts freeing your limited weeks from the endless pull of right now, so you can start building a future that's actually worth your 4,000-week investment. Section 2, the psychology of time perception. Let's step back from the noise for a second and look at why time feels so slippery. Some weeks feel endless, others vanish in a blink. You can have a day packed with meetings that leaves you feeling like you achieved nothing, and another spent quietly walking or reading that somehow feels expansive and meaningful. That's not just in your head, it's how your brain perceives time. Psychologists call this time perspective the mental lens through which you interpret your past, live your present, and imagine your future. And how you distribute your mental focus across those three determines not just how you feel about your life, but how effectively you live it. Time perspective theory, developed by Philip Zimbardo and John Boyd, explains that people tend to live predominantly in one of three orientations: the past, the present, or the future. Each of these has both healthy and unhealthy versions, and most of us move through them without realizing we've fallen into one pattern more than the others. The key to using your 4,000 weeks wisely is learning to balance them, not living trapped in any single time zone of the mind. Let's start with the past. When you look back, two main narratives shape your experience. A past positive perspective focuses on gratitude, nostalgia, and the lessons of experience. It roots you in identity and gives you confidence that you've survived challenges before. A past negative orientation, however, traps you in regret and rumination. You replay mistakes, embarrassing moments, missed chances, each loop making the present feel smaller. The funny part is that both mindsets deal with the same memories. The difference lies in interpretation. When you learn to reflect without self-punishment, the past becomes your ally instead of your jailer. Then there's the present. It sounds like the obvious place to live, right? But there are two radically different ways to inhabit it. The present hedonistic orientation is pleasure-driven, seeking instant gratification, chasing fun, and resisting restraint. It's spontaneous and exciting, but it often sabotages long-term progress because it values feeling good now over being fulfilled later. The present fatalistic mindset is the opposite. It believes nothing you do can really change outcomes, that life just happens to you. When you fall into that, ambition feels pointless and time becomes something to endure rather than direct. Still, there's a healthy present, one grounded in awareness instead of impulse or apathy. That version keeps you connected to the moment without losing sight of your path. It's the calm presence you feel when you're fully absorbed in writing, playing, or deep conversation. You're not checking the clock, but later you'll realize you spent those hours meaningfully. That's mindful engagement, and it's an underrated antidote to burnout. Finally, there's the future orientation. This is the mindset of planners, visionaries, achievers, the people who love goals, timelines, and optimization. A future positive perspective connects today's actions with future rewards. It makes delayed gratification possible. You invest in studying, training, building because you believe in the payoff later. But a future negative outlook turns that same orientation into anxiety. You imagine worst-case scenarios, fear loss, and delay choices out of worry. It's the version that whispers there's never enough time, even while you're spending time trying to prepare perfectly. When a person lives mostly in one orientation, time warps. The past-bound feel heavy. The hyper-present stretch their weeks with distraction and stress. The over-future-focused always chase the next milestone but rarely savor any of them. What research shows and what real life confirms is that people with a balanced time perspective have the highest well-being, resilience, and life satisfaction. They can draw strength from their past, act decisively in the present, and plan effectively for the future. They don't treat time as something to fight, they treat it as something to integrate. So what does balance actually look like in practice? It starts by noticing where you naturally lean. Some of us default to the past, replaying each conversation for hidden meaning. Others live in the future, filling every day with checklists of what should come next. Neither extreme is wrong, they just need calibration. Ask yourself, when did you last let a pleasant memory fuel a current goal? That's a micro moment of balance, bridging past and future through conscious presence. Here's an example. A client of mine once felt guilty about relaxing. She believed every hour not spent building her future was wasted. She'd plan her days down to 15-minute intervals and panic if something disrupted them. When she discovered time perspective theory, she started experimenting. Each morning, she spent 3 minutes recalling a positive memory that made her proud of how far she'd come, something small, like finishing a tough project months ago. Then she set one intention for the present day that aligned with her larger goal, and at night she wrote a single line about what she was grateful for today. After 2 weeks, her stress levels dropped sharply, not because she worked less, but because she felt time as whole, not fragmented. She was no longer sprinting through weeks, she was inhabiting them. Most of us, especially high achievers, over-index toward the future. We confuse preparation for security. We tell ourselves that if we just plan better, life will finally slow down, but the truth is, the future never arrives in the way we imagine. There's always another horizon. The cost of living too far ahead is that we never notice the present we worked so hard to reach. It's like constantly leaning forward while walking. You move fast but never feel stable. Shifting your time perspective isn't about ignoring any dimension, it's about giving each one a fair voice. The past teaches context. The present gives experience. The future provides direction. When one voice drowns out the others, life tilts. A balanced perspective lets you remember where you came from, live with awareness now, and move forward intentionally. That's the mental architecture of people who use their 4,000 weeks wisely. They don't just manage time, they inhabit it fully. Now, here's where this ties into your real life. Next time you feel overwhelmed, try a quick reset. Pause, name which time zone you're stuck in, and invite another one in. If you're worrying about tomorrow, anchor yourself by noticing something you appreciate right now: the sound, the color, the breath. If you're ruminating on the past, turn that memory into a teaching moment. If you're drifting aimlessly in the present, sketch one small future step. Every time you do this, you're bending time back into balance. Understanding your psychological relationship with time gives you power. It turns abstract weeks into something you can shape consciously. The stopwatch doesn't slow down, but your experience of time expands. When you function across all dimensions of time with awareness, you stop chasing life, you start pacing it. And that shift, subtle but profound, is what opens the door to controlling how your remaining weeks actually feel. Section 3, the Planning Fallacy, Why Future? You keeps lying. We all have that moment, staring at a plan that once made perfect sense, only to watch it explode in slow motion. You swore you'd finish the project by Friday. It's now Tuesday night of the next week, and somehow you're still catching up. You thought the move would take 1 weekend, the side hustle 1 month, the fitness plan 6 weeks. The same optimism that made you excited also made you blind. Psychologists call this the planning fallacy, our built-in habit of underestimating how long things take, even when we failed at similar estimates before. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky first named it back in the 70s, and decades of follow-up research has confirmed it. Humans are relentlessly unrealistic about time. The crazy part? It doesn't matter if you know it's happening. Awareness doesn't cure it because optimism feels too good. When you picture your future self getting things done, you're not lying, you're high on potential. Your brain edits out delays, distractions, and emotional dip moments, replacing them with perfect world conditions that never actually exist. Think back to the last time you set a deadline for something that mattered. Maybe it was a creative project or a big career move. You mapped out the steps, blocked out the schedule, told yourself you'd be disciplined. But as the days passed, tiny obstacles multiplied. Emails, mood swings, feedback loops, all invisible on your original plan. It didn't fail because you were lazy. It failed because you made the same assumption almost everyone makes. Future. You will be smarter, faster, and emotionally immune to chaos. But future you is still you. Same habits, same attention span, same need for lunch and rest and bathroom breaks. The problem isn't bad planning, it's idealized planning, designing your schedule for a version of yourself who doesn't exist. We picture ourselves executing tasks with robotic focus, forgetting that we live emotional, messy, unpredictable lives. The gap between plan and reality is the zone where guilt and stress breed. We end up sinking time we never budgeted into recovering from those emotions, not the tasks themselves. There's another bias inside this fallacy, the inside view. When you plan, you look from the inside of the project, thinking about every step you'll take, every tool you'll use. You forget there's a wider pattern, the outside view, which says people like you, doing things like this, usually take longer than they think. That's where the concept of reference class forecasting comes in. Instead of guessing from scratch, you look at similar projects you or others have done and base your prediction on their actual timelines. If the last 3 reports took 6 weeks each, stop kidding yourself that this one will take 3 because you learned from mistakes. The data says otherwise. Writers use this trick all the time. If your last article took 8 hours, start with that baseline. Adjust only if you can name something specific that will change. Not I'll be more focused, but I'll skip external research because I've already collected sources. That small shift from hopeful estimation to evidence-based forecasting transforms your relationship with time. You stop seeing delays as personal failures and start seeing them as predictable variables. Still, even with outside data, human optimism sneaks in. That's why it helps to run a pre-mortem before big goals. Instead of envisioning success, imagine you've failed. Ask yourself, it's 6 months from now, this project fell apart. What happened? Maybe you realize your timeline ignored holidays, or your collaborator always delivers late, or your motivation dips after week 3. Listing those failure points ahead of time lets you build buffers where you'll need them most. It's unglamorous, but prevention beats panic every time. One student I coached learned this trick when she kept underestimating study time. She'd plan weekend marathons, then crash after 3 hours. Finally, we looked at her past data. Every time she said, "I'll study all day," she averaged 4 hours of real focus. So we flipped the script. She planned for 4 hours and counted anything beyond that as bonus time. Her stress vanished because she stopped promising future her a fantasy. Within 2 weeks, her consistency doubled. She wasn't working harder, she was planning honestly. Here's another reality check method. Track actual versus estimated time for a month. Write down how long tasks actually take, from chores to work projects. It's boring at first, but it rebuilds your internal clock. Soon, your instincts recalibrate. When you go to plan the next thing, your "this should take 2 hours" voice becomes a solid, realistically 4. That gap is where peace lives. And it's not just timing we distort, it's energy. Future. You always has infinite motivation. You tell yourself, next week I'll wake up early and crush it. But next week arrives and you're still you, maybe tired, emotionally drained, tempted by the same distractions. To fight that lie, design your schedule as if your energy will be lower than ideal. That's what productivity experts call defensive scheduling. Build around your weakest moments, not your best intentions. I used to build aggressive timelines because I thought efficiency equaled worth. But the more I tracked my real output, the clearer it became. I wasn't failing because I was lazy. I was failing because I was delusional. I'd plan 10-hour creative days that didn't account for the hour it takes to warm up creatively or the half hour to recover after tough feedback. Once I added those inevitable slowdowns to my calendar, something amazing happened. I actually started finishing projects faster because I stopped hating myself for running late. Reality became part of the plan. So here's your future. You treat every plan as a negotiation, not a promise. When you write down a goal, imagine sitting across the table from your future self and asking, will you still want to do this on that day, in that mood, with that energy? If the answer feels shaky, redesign the plan. Add shorter steps, bigger rewards, or clearer accountability. You're not lowering standards, you're raising accuracy. One technique that helps bridge honesty and motivation is using implementation intentions, specific if-then rules. Like if it's 8 and I'm still scrolling, I'll close the app and open my project file. These micro-contracts tie real conditions to actions, reducing the need for willpower when future you inevitably resists. They shrink the gap between plan and follow-through because the decision is already made. And finally, a mindset shift that completes the loop. Delay optimism, but never hope. Being realistic with time doesn't mean being cynical, it means you respect time enough to stop gambling with it. The planning fallacy convinces you that success depends on perfect scheduling. In truth, success depends on flexible consistency. Plans are rough sketches, progress is the messy painting that follows. Next time you start a big project, don't ask, how soon can I finish this? Ask, what will real life look like while I try? Imagine the interruptions, the distractions, the unexpected Tuesday slump. Plan for reality, not fantasy. That's how you stop future you from whispering lies and start building a life that runs on truth. Because when you face time honestly, you stop letting optimism steal your weeks and start investing them where they actually count. Section 4, Redefining Success Before Time Defines You. Let's talk about success, the word that drives most of what we chase, but rarely what we feel. Somewhere along the line, success became a scoreboard of productivity. More projects, more followers, more revenue, more boxes ticked. The culture of hustle taught us that significance comes from quantity, but that version of success silently rewrites your life around output. You start living like an equation. If I produce enough, I'll finally feel enough. Yet the more you add, the emptier it feels. We built a generation that's ambitious but exhausted. If you're watching this, chances are you've felt the crash before. That morning when you wake up with 12 hours ahead of you and every cell in your body already feels behind. The to-do list is endless, yet none of it seems aligned with what you actually want. You might be winning at tasks, but losing at purpose. That tension shows up as burnout, the enemy of meaningful work. Research from the World Health Organization defines burnout as more than fatigue. It's emotional depletion and cynicism caused by sustained, unmanaged stress. And right now, burnout is everywhere. A recent set of studies showed that roughly 3 out of 5 workers report feeling its effects. For young achievers, the numbers climb even higher. We were told that hard work equals progress. But unchecked ambition turns work into identity, and when you only measure your worth by output, rest feels like failure. You can see it in subtle ways, checking emails at dinner, saying yes to just one more gig, or filling weekends with productive downtime. The world rewards visible effort, not quiet clarity. Somewhere we confused being valuable with being available. The culture of endless hustle didn't appear by accident. It's a byproduct of industrial thinking, people measured in units, time valued only when traded for results. But humans aren't machines. Our energy isn't linear, it's cyclical. We have seasons of creation and seasons of recovery. The myth of constant acceleration ignores biology and psychology alike. When your worth depends on constant delivery, exhaustion isn't an accident, it's policy. So what if the measure of success wasn't volume but alignment? Imagine defining it as a composite of 3 elements: purpose, sustainability, and relationships. Purpose answers why you do something. Sustainability answers how long you can keep doing it without breaking. Relationships answer who you're becoming through it. When all 3 connect, success stops being a race and starts feeling like rhythm. Let's unpack that. Purpose isn't a single grand mission statement, it's direction you can articulate without reading it off a brand deck. It's knowing which kind of impact leaves you fulfilled when the noise quiets down. Without it, you drift toward whatever seems impressive in the moment. Every trend, every metric, every external sign becomes a potential detour. The test for purpose is simple. Does this effort expand the life I want or maintain the one I'm scared to lose? Next comes sustainability. It's the long game. Any goal that burns your health or joy as fuel will collapse no matter how shiny it looks. Sustainable success honors rhythms: work, rest, reflection, renewal. It values progress you can repeat, not progress that destroys you once and for all. Think of elite athletes. Their mastery isn't built on permanent intensity, but on recovery loops. The breaks are not the absence of discipline. They are the framework that holds discipline together. Then there's relationships, the factor ambition often eats first. In the rush to achieve, we treat connections as optional or transactional. But psychologically, relationships are the single most reliable predictor of long-term well-being. Meaningful connection regulates stress, reinforces identity, and gives context to every hour you spend. Success that isolates isn't success, it's loneliness disguised as achievement. When you start redefining success with these 3 elements, life recalibrates. Decisions become simpler. You stop asking, "Can I squeeze this in?" and start asking, "Does this align with who I want to be?" That's when the frantic yeses turn into intentional numbers. You realize that saying no isn't rejection, it's design. It's creating room for what genuinely deserves to grow. Here's an experiment worth trying, an internal audit called the 1,000-week check. Pretend you have exactly 1,000 weeks left to live. That's about 19 years. What would still matter? Which goals would keep meaning if no one else ever noticed them? Which pursuits would you drop instantly without external validation? This isn't morbid, it's clarifying. Compressing the timeline exposes priorities hidden under politeness and fear. If a goal loses meaning under the pressure of limitation, it never held real purpose anyway. When you run this check honestly, something beautiful happens. Your mind shifts from accumulation to alignment. You begin to care less about volume and more about depth, less about how many tasks you finish, more about whether those tasks feel like you. And that feeling of enoughness, not the applause, becomes your indicator that you're on the right track. Of course, redefining success doesn't mean abandoning ambition. It means upgrading it. Ambition isn't the enemy, directionless ambition is. The healthiest ambition is iterative. It expands as you do, leaving space for rest, reflection, and change. Sustainable ambition treats self-care and boundary setting as strategic moves, not indulgences. Because without energy, no mission survives. There's a cultural shift happening right now. People are quietly rejecting the glorified exhaustion model. They're building careers around freedom instead of fatigue, treating well-being as infrastructure, not aftercare. They're discovering that slowing down isn't retreat, it's precision. When you measure success by attention instead of acceleration, everything sharpens. You notice better ideas, deeper conversations, more authentic motivation. Take a moment and visualize this: two versions of you a decade from now. One has all the achievements you crave but feels constantly stretched, disconnected, brittle. The other accomplishes perhaps slightly less on paper but wakes each morning grounded, surrounded by people she loves, pursuing work that feels meaningful and sustainable. Which version do you trust more to use her remaining weeks wisely? The answer shows what success really means to you, stripped of aesthetic. So before time defines you, define success for yourself. Because if you don't, the world will do it, and it'll choose goals that keep you busy, not fulfilled. Write your new definition somewhere visible. Let it include purpose, sustainability, relationships. Then compare your current daily decisions to that lens. Where are you overinvested? Where are you starving yourself of joy? Adjust one small thing this week and watch the ripple. Redefining success is the pivot point of your 4,000-week journey. It's the bridge between doing and being, between chasing time and partnering with it. Once you see success not as a finish line but as a pattern of alignment, you free yourself from the race entirely. And that freedom is where real productivity begins, the kind that builds meaning, not just movement. Section 5, Boundaries, the Guardrails of Meaningful Ambition. Here's the truth: most ambitious people avoid. A lack of boundaries isn't a sign of passion, it's a symptom of fear. We say yes to too many things because we're terrified of missing out, falling behind, or disappointing someone. But every time you say yes to one more urgency, you say no to something quietly vital: your rest, your relationships, your focus, your growth. Boundaries are not walls blocking ambition, they're the guardrails that keep it from driving off a cliff. When you think about boundaries, don't picture restriction, picture design. A well-defined boundary isn't about pushing people away, it's about defining where your energy flows best. High achievers often treat their time like open access real estate, inviting anyone to build on it. But time is limited land. Each minute someone squats on without purpose is a piece of your 4,000 weeks you'll never reclaim. Boundaries make you a responsible steward of that land. The biggest misconception is that boundaries are selfish. But think about the last time you overcommitted. You stretched yourself thin, gave half energy to everyone, resented the pressure, and secretly wished people would understand. The result wasn't generosity, it was depletion. Boundaries, ironically, are what make kindness sustainable. They turn resentment into clarity and burnout into balance. Here's where people usually trip. They treat boundaries as reactionary instead of proactive. You wait until you're overstressed, then you banish everything in frustration. But proactive boundaries are like well-placed speed bumps. You set them before the crash, not after. Start by identifying your energy budget. Just like money, energy is finite. List the key areas of your week: work projects, relationships, self-care, creative goals, and assign each a rough percentage of your energy. Add them up. If it crosses 100%, something's overdrawing your account. You can't run on emotional credit forever without paying interest in fatigue, anxiety, and missed opportunities. Next, translate that budget into visible lines on the calendar. Block focus time, sleep, social breaks, even nothingness. Treat those as appointments with yourself. If someone asks to meet, then say, "I'm booked." You don't owe anyone the label of what that booking is. It could be you sitting quietly with coffee, and that's valid. The boundary isn't about secrecy, it's about self-respect. Most people resist this because they crave the illusion of control by availability. It feels powerful to say, "I can handle it all." But that's borrowed confidence. Real control is the ability to choose where you don't invest energy. Without that skill, you turn ambition into dependency, your worth tied to being constantly needed. I learned this the brutal way. A few years ago, I was saying yes to everything, every collaboration, every last-minute call, every extra task. I told myself it was opportunity. But one week, after 14-hour days and zero downtime, I woke up unable to focus at all. My brain fogged, body aching, spirit flat. That collapse wasn't random, it was the invoice for all the unpaid boundaries I'd ignored. The following month, I started resetting. I drafted a simple rule: if it costs peace, the price is too high. It became my internal checkpoint before agreeing to anything. Let's walk through how to set boundaries that actually hold. First, get clear on what matters most this season. It changes. Sometimes it's career growth, sometimes it's recovery, sometimes connection. Rank them. Boundaries exist to defend priorities, so if everything ranks first place, none of them stand. Second, learn the language of firm but kind communication. You don't need elaborate excuses, you need clarity. Practice simple scripts: I can't take that on this week, or that doesn't fit my focus right now. Notice there's no apology. Boundaries aren't offensives, they're orientation tools. The people who truly value you will adjust. Those who only benefited from your overgiving will fade, and that's progress disguised as loss. Third, expect backlash, not necessarily hostility, but discomfort. When you start protecting time, people accustomed to your constant yes might feel the pinch. Stay calm. You're not breaking connection, you're redefining terms. Boundaries teach others how to treat you, and retraining takes repetition. Fourth, set boundaries with yourself. External boundaries mean little if your internal ones crumble. That's the hardest part. It's saying no to the voice that insists you just check email once more or push through even though your energy's done. Self-discipline and honoring boundaries is the origin of authentic freedom. You'll never feel fully present if you're mentally escaping every moment to what you should be doing next. Here's a micro exercise. Next time you feel that drift of overcommitment, heart racing, list expanding, stop and name what value you're defending by saying no. Maybe it's creativity, health, or peace. Naming it reframes the refusal from loss to protection. You aren't closing a door, you're locking a treasure chest. Remember, without defined edges, purpose leaks. Boundaries are not about scarcity, they're about concentration. By narrowing where you invest, you multiply impact. This is why successful creators, leaders, and thinkers often appear selective. They've traded popularity for potency. Their yes means something because it's not always available. As you start building your guardrails, pay attention to guilt. It's the smoke that appears when old programming burns away. We're conditioned to equate busyness with virtue, so resting or refusing can trigger shame. Let guilt pass without obedience. It's just evidence that you're breaking the spell of perpetual availability. Soon, you'll notice a shift, your focus sharpens, your emotions stabilize, your relationships improve. Because true presence requires protected space, you can't connect deeply when your attention's scattered by endless commitments. Boundaries give you the calm confidence to engage fully where you choose instead of anxiously everywhere at once. And that's meaningful ambition in motion. It's not shrinking dreams, it's structuring them. Boundaries turn potential into precision. The fewer battles you fight unnecessarily, the more energy remains for your highest work. So before chasing more goals, draw the lines that will keep them alive. Because ambition without limits eventually burns itself out, ambition with boundaries burns steady, bright, and long enough to illuminate a meaningful life. Section 6, Integrated Self-Care, Refueling Without Guilt. Let's talk about something every ambitious person quietly struggles with: resting without feeling guilty. Somewhere along the grind, self-care became a marketing buzzword instead of what it actually is: maintenance for high performance. When you treat rest as indulgence, you're basically deciding that burnout is just part of the plan. But the most productive people you admire don't run on caffeine and chaos, they run on deliberate recovery. Real power comes from a well-rested mind that can sustain intensity, not mimic it. The idea of self-care has been warped into extremes, either luxury spa days no one has time for or empty affirmations that don't change anything. But research paints a clear picture. Consistent, integrated self-care directly improves focus, memory, and resilience. One large-scale study from the National Institute of Mental Health found that people who practiced simple self-care routines felt 2/3 more mentally resilient. That's not fluff, that's neuroscience. Your brain literally performs better when it gets cycles of restoration. Think of it this way: your body is the hardware and your ambition is the software. Neglect the hardware and the most brilliant software still crashes. The trick isn't finding time for self-care, it's embedding it into your default system so it never becomes optional. That's what I call integrated self-care, the version woven right into everyday life, not a separate luxury you earn after exhaustion. So let's build your foundation with what I call the daily four, for non-negotiable categories that refuel your system: sleep, movement, nutrition, and joy. They're simple, but how you integrate them determines whether you burn out or build up. Start with sleep. Adequate rest isn't laziness, it's literal brain maintenance. During deep sleep, your brain clears metabolic waste and consolidates memory. Skimping on it doesn't give you extra hours, it steals clarity from every hour that follows. Yet achievers treat sleep as an optional upgrade because they can catch up on weekends. Science says otherwise. Chronic short sleep stacks cognitive debt that no single nap pays back. The solution is rhythm, not random recovery. Set a consistent shutoff time like you would a meeting with your future self's sanity. Guard it as fiercely as any deadline because it's the base layer holding every ambition upright. Then there's movement. Exercise shouldn't only serve appearance goals, it's about regulating mood and cognition. When you move, you flood your brain with endorphins and oxygen that sharpen focus. Research shows even a 20-minute walk improves creative problem solving. You don't need marathon routines, you need consistency. Pick one movement pattern you actually enjoy, dancing, cycling, yoga, walking the dog, and give it a permanent slot. Movement is emotional housekeeping. It sweeps anxiety out so creativity can move in. The third pillar, nutrition. What you eat fuels your cognitive performance more than your willpower ever could. High achievers often ignore meals until their energy crashes, then depend on sugar and coffee as quick fixes. But unstable blood sugar levels mimic burnout symptoms: irritability, indecision, scattered focus. Stable energy starts with routine nourishment, balanced meals that keep your brain supplied. You can't think clearly if you're nutritionally under-resourced, no matter how disciplined you feel. Treat food as infrastructure, not interruption. And finally, joy. This one gets dismissed fastest because it looks non-essential. But activities done purely for satisfaction, not progress, not outcome, are what reset your nervous system from constant output mode. Joy could mean painting, cooking, reading, gaming, gardening, laughing with friends. It's not distraction, it's recalibration. When you schedule joy, you remind your brain that life isn't a performance report. It's your emotional pit stop that keeps the race sustainable. Now, here's where most people go wrong. They keep self-care isolated from productivity systems. They'll time block work, but fit in self-care reactively. The result? It never happens. Integration means embedding recovery directly into planning. For example, when mapping your week, place energy renewal blocks before high-output tasks, a 15-minute walk before presentations, deep breaths before creative sessions, screen-free wind-down before bed. Treat these transitions as part of the task workflow, not separate from it. Productivity and rest should trade turns like inhale and exhale. One makes the other possible. I learned how critical this is after my first real burnout. I'd been running at top speed for months. Projects, emails, late-night editing, endless caffeine. Outwardly, everything looked great. Content performing, clients happy. Inside, I felt like static, jittery, fatigued, disconnected. One afternoon, I sat staring at my blank screen, tears welling for no reason except total depletion. It hit me. I hadn't felt simple joy in weeks. So I started rebuilding from zero. I carved a 30-minute morning routine that had nothing to do with work, stretching, quiet breakfast, sunlight instead of scrolling. Within 10 days, ideas poured back in. My focus returned, not because I hustled harder, but because I stopped running on empty. That reset became a pattern I never dropped again. Self-care guilt usually sounds like this: I could be doing something productive right now. But here's the reality: resting is productive when it's strategic. It's not about escaping effort, it's about preserving capacity for effort that matters. Overextending doesn't prove commitment, it proves mismanagement. Time off used intentionally multiplies future output. Every break is a force multiplier, turning exhaustion into renewal. Think of adding proactive rest to your calendar the same way athletes schedule deload weeks. Instead of crashing into random burnout days, you consciously lower intensity before your body forces you to. Try this. Every Sunday, pick one non-negotiable rest ritual for the week. Maybe a long bath, a slow dinner, or a tech-free morning. Frame it as maintenance, not reward. By labeling rest as required, you retrain your guilt response. Still, sometimes you'll catch yourself mid-scroll, brain buzzing, refusing to stop because stopping feels unsafe. That's the burnout reflex. Fear that pausing means losing your edge. Combat it with what scientists call active recovery: light, engaging activities that soothe without numbing. Journal, stretch, tidy, or take a gentle walk. Recovery isn't absence of activity, it's presence without pressure. As you design integrated self-care, align it with your energy patterns. Morning person, schedule mental sprints early in recovery mid-afternoon. Night owl? Flip it. The goal is harmony, not perfection. Flexibility keeps routines from becoming another performance arena. For structure lovers, here's a quick formula: the 70-0 and a 10 rhythm. Devote roughly 70% of your energy to output, work, learning, goals, 20% to input, rest, reflection, inspiration, and 10% to pure joy. Adjust monthly based on stress levels, but never let rest drop to zero. That balance sustains creativity long after adrenaline fades. And if guilt still whispers that self-care is selfish, remember this: depleted you helps fewer people. Restoration isn't self-centered, it's service-enhancing. When your mind is clear and body-grounded, you show up sharper, kinder, and more generous. You can't pour from an empty schedule any more than an empty cup. So integrate before you collapse. Build recovery into strategy, not emergency. Let sleep, movement, nutrition, and joy live on your calendar as boldly as deadlines. Because when you nurture the system that carries your dreams, time itself stretches, you stop sprinting toward meaning and start living inside it. And that's how self-care stops being guilt and becomes the quiet engine of every meaningful, sustainable goal you'll ever create. Section 7. Choosing the important over the urgent. Here's where the whole philosophy starts taking shape: choosing the important over the urgent. Sounds simple on paper, right? But this is where most of our 4,000 weeks quietly disappear. We don't lose them in big, dramatic mistakes. We lose them in small reactions: answering one more email, accepting one more meeting invite, scrolling for just 5 more minutes. Every one of those tiny choices feels harmless in the moment, but together they create a lifetime spent managing other people's priorities. Urgency is addictive. It mimics importance so perfectly that we can't tell them apart anymore. Your phone buzzes, your brain lights up, and you think, this must matter. That's the urgency trigger, the same mechanism that ancient humans used to respond to threats. The problem is modern life turns that system against us. Notifications, deadlines, reminders, they all hijack attention because they feel like emergencies. But real emergencies are rare. Most urgent stuff is simply noise in disguise. If you've ever ended a packed day and thought, I worked nonstop but did nothing that mattered, you've met the urgency illusion firsthand. It's the classic productivity trap. The day felt full, yet your long-term goals stayed untouched. That's because the urgent tasks are short-term visible, while important work is long-term invisible. You can see the unread emails piling up, but you can't see the opportunity cost of not writing your book or launching your project. Importance doesn't ping, it whispers. Let's borrow from the earlier Eisenhower matrix. Picture that important but not urgent quadrant again. It's the home of progress. The long-term strategy, skill building, relationship cultivation, creative exploration all live there. And because no one demands them right now, they're the first to get postponed. Successful people aren't less distracted. They're more disciplined about defending that quadrant. They treat it like sacred land on their weekly map. In real life, that quadrant looks like this: scheduling 30 minutes to practice your craft when no deadline requires it. Having a deep conversation that strengthens a key relationship, even though your inbox is overflowing. Spending an hour planning the next quarter instead of reacting to this week's fires. None of those acts are urgent, but they're the soil where every future success grows. The irony is, by spending more time in the important, non-urgent zone, you actually reduce future crises because you're preventing problems before they're emergencies. To make that shift, start small. Every Sunday evening, do a future impact review. List your upcoming responsibilities, then for each one ask, will this still matter 12 months from now? If the answer's no, it belongs to the urgent column. If yes, it's important. Schedule the important items first, then fit the urgent around them. This single change flips the usual order people live by. You're no longer shoving meaningful work into leftover time, you're giving it prime real estate. Now, let's be honest, it's not easy. The urgent has structure and instant gratification. The important is abstract and slow. That's why your brain resists it. Dealing with important work forces patience, uncertainty, and sometimes boredom. There's no quick dopamine fix when you're sketching ideas for a business plan or learning a new skill. But the satisfaction that comes later, that's the deep kind, the type that rewires your sense of what productivity means. Here's a small story. A few years ago, I was obsessed with staying on top of everything. Emails answered within seconds, notifications cleared hourly, messages promptly acknowledged. I thought that speed made me dependable. One afternoon, while tidying my inbox, I noticed a folder labeled Big Projects. It held neglected dreams, ideas for workshops, outlines for passion projects, potential collaborations. Some had been sitting there for over a year. That's when I realized I'd built a career around maintenance instead of creation. I wasn't leading my time, I was just cleaning it. So I ran an experiment. For 2 weeks, I checked email only twice a day, morning and late afternoon. The rest of the time, I dedicated 2 uninterrupted hours daily to important-only work. At first, it was agony. I was jittery, convinced I was missing something. But by the second week, something clicked. My anxiety dropped, my creativity spiked, and I actually finished an outline I'd been procrastinating on for months. Urgency had been stealing my momentum under the mask of responsibility. If you're scared to ignore urgency, remember this: anything truly critical will find another way to reach you. The world won't collapse because you didn't reply instantly. What collapses quietly, though, is your potential when you never give it undivided attention. Important work demands solitude, thoughtfulness, and consistency, none of which survive the chaos of constant reaction. To support this mindset, build a weekly planning ritual that emphasizes future payoff over immediate relief. Pick 3 life-moving goals for the week, big or small, and block them on your calendar first. These are your priority anchors. Around them, scatter the reactive tasks: emails, errands, small deadlines. When urgent requests appear midweek, check whether they align with one of your 3 anchors. If not, delegate, defer, or say no. This system trains your brain to protect progress instead of perform speed. Another trick: practice temporal zooming. When faced with new commitments, project yourself a year forward and ask, "Will I be glad I spent time on this?" That distance collapses urgency bias. Future. You seize through the illusion instantly. It's a cognitive version of stepping back from a painting. You can finally see which colors truly matter. Here's a relatable scenario. Imagine you get 2 hours free on Friday afternoon. One part of you screams, "Catch up on messages, clear the to-do list." Another whispers, "Work on that idea you've been avoiding." Both options will feel productive, but only one builds something lasting. I tried choosing the whisper once, shut down notifications, opened a blank document, and wrote for 2 hours. The result wasn't polished, but it reignited direction. Monday rolled around, and I felt ahead for the first time in ages because I'd invested in something bigger than the week itself. That's the secret. Urgency gives you the illusion of control. Importance gives you actual agency. Urgent work says, "Keep up." Important work says, "Choose." And those choices are what shape legacy. Every bold career, every meaningful relationship, every internal peace stems from moments when someone ignored the flashing alerts and built quietly instead. Still, you'll need to train for it. Start measuring days not by tasks completed, but by impact created. Ask yourself, what did I move forward that still matters next month? When that answer becomes clear, the anxiety around immediacy fades. It's not that you stop caring about deadlines, you simply stop mistaking them for direction. So the next time you catch yourself rushing to clear small tasks, pause and breathe. You're standing at the crossroads that define your 4,000 weeks. One path keeps you reactive, the other, intentional. Choose the one that feels slower but truer. Start one meaningful task today, the kind that won't shout for your attention but will thank you in the future. Because what you prioritize each week quietly decides what you'll remember at the end of all the weeks you have left. Section 8, the Four-Quadrant Life Framework. By now, you've built awareness, boundaries, and rhythm, but awareness without direction still leaves you wondering, okay, what do I actually do with my time? This is where we turn insight into structure. I want to show you a system that helps you visualize your life as a whole rather than a checklist of obligations. I call it the Four-Quadrant Life Framework, a way to see how your limited weeks divide across what truly sustains you: body, brain, relationships, and purpose. Think of these quadrants as the 4 investments that compound over your 4,000-week lifespan. Every week, you're allocating time into each, whether you realize it or not. This framework just makes the exchange visible, so you can choose more consciously. Let's start with the body quadrant. This one's obvious, but often neglected. Your physical health is the foundation that determines how the rest of your life functions. It's not just about exercise or diet. It's about energy, your core currency for everything else. How much of your week strengthens or drains that energy? Every skipped meal, late night, or glued to the screen afternoon is a withdrawal. Every stretch, walk, or intentional rest is a deposit. I once coached a creative professional who prided herself on 15-hour workdays until a sudden health scare forced her to stop. She said later, "I realized I'd been outsourcing my future to caffeine." The body quadrant is your reminder that time's quality depends on energy, and energy depends on care. Without this base, dreaming big just creates bigger burnout. Then comes the brain quadrant, your growth, curiosity, and mental stimulation. It's not only formal learning, It's everything that keeps your thinking alive. Reading, exploring new ideas, developing skills, those moments feed your adaptability, which is the single best predictor of long-term fulfillment. When people stop learning, weeks blur. Time accelerates because there's nothing novel to mark memory. That's why childhood summers feel endless while adult months vanish. Novelty stretches perception. So ask yourself, when was the last time you learned something just for fascination's sake? Each time you feed your mind, you slow down subjective time. The weeks feel richer, not shorter. Time expansion actually begins in the brain quadrant. The third quadrant is relationships. If you mapped your happiness over decades, it would correlate less with achievements and more with moments of genuine connection. Studies following participants over their entire adult lives show that close relationships are the strongest predictor of both longevity and satisfaction. Yet when life gets busy, this quadrant is the first to shrink. We tell ourselves we'll catch up soon, but soon rarely arrives. Here's a reality check. You can always make more money, but you can't manufacture more time with the people who matter. The trick is to build connection into the same logistical seriousness you give to work. Put friends on your calendar like deadlines. Text to schedule, not just comment on stories. Quality time rarely happens spontaneously. It happens by design. And finally, there's purpose. This is the quadrant that gives meaning to all the others. It's what ties your physical effort, learning, and relationships into something larger than a list of routines. Purpose can mean contribution, creativity, faith, service, whatever aligns your daily actions with the story you want your life to tell. The key is to realize that purpose isn't a single grand passion waiting to be discovered. It's something you construct week by noticing what pulls you toward vitality rather than fatigue. When you ignore this quadrant, achievement feels hollow. When you invest in it, even small tasks glow with significance. Now picture your life as a square divided into these 4 equal sections. If you kept a time log for a typical week, where would your hours cluster? Most achievers find they're overweighted in one quadrant, usually brain or purpose disguised as work, and anemic in body and relationships. The result is imbalance that shows up as fatigue, disconnection, or the eerie sense that progress isn't satisfying. Awareness is step 1. The next step is recalibration, redistributing attention, like a portfolio. Here's how to evaluate your quadrants. Take out a sheet and draw the square. Label each quadrant. Then, do a rough percentage estimate. Out of your total waking hours, how much goes into body, brain, relationships, purpose? Write your honest guess. Don't pretty it up. When you see numbers like 5% for health and 60% for work, the imbalance becomes undeniable. But instead of guilt, use curiosity. Ask what story those numbers tell. Are you investing in maintenance more than creation? Protection more than growth? This reflective inventory doesn't judge, it informs. Next, perform a time audit for one representative week. Track what you actually do in half-hour increments, not forever, just for awareness. Patterns will jump out. Maybe 2 hours lost nightly to passive scrolling, or 3 unplanned meetings eating your creative margin. Translate every chunk into a quadrant category. By the end, the visual snapshot looks like a heat map of your life. You finally see where the weeks truly go, not where you assume they go. And that sight alone can jolt you toward change more effectively than any motivational quote. Once you know your distribution, create a calendar inventory. Review recurring events through the quadrant lens. Which activities strengthen more than one area at once? Those are high-leverage habits. For instance, joining a hiking group might nurture both body and relationships. Studying psychology could feed brain and purpose. You'll notice some commitments feed none. They exist purely from inertia. Those get flagged for pruning. Remember, a meaningful life isn't about stuffing all quadrants with identical hours. It's about ensuring none starve completely. After identifying imbalance, decide what 10% of your time should shift this week. 10% sounds small but compounds fast, roughly 8 waking hours. Imagine reclaiming just 1 hour a day from autopilot tasks and reinvesting it strategically. Monday could borrow that hour for a workout, Tuesday for journaling, Wednesday for calling a friend, Thursday for personal study, Friday for quiet planning. By week's end, you've reallocated time toward wholeness without appending your schedule. The 4-quadrant approach works because it's additive, not punitive. It expands meaning rather than cutting joy. Now, a story that illustrates the pivot. A client named Lina once told me she felt constantly drained despite doing everything right. When she mapped her quadrants, 90% lived in brain and purpose through relentless work. Body and relationships barely existed. No wonder she felt hollow. We designed a micro shift. Daily stretching before email, 1 dinner a week, phone-free, monthly volunteering that combined people and meaning. 6 months later, she described her energy as quietly limitless. Same job, same hours, completely different life. Balance didn't demand radical change, just reallocation. Here's why the framework works psychologically. The human brain craves variety and challenge, but it also needs recovery and belonging. When one quadrant dominates, emotional feedback dulls. That dullness masquerades as boredom or apathy, leading you to chase more intensity in the same area, working harder, learning another skill, when what you actually need is nourishment elsewhere. Rebalancing reignites vitality without necessarily increasing effort. It's synergy, not struggle. To keep the framework alive, schedule weekly reflections. Every Sunday, glance at your quadrants. Which one felt depleted? Which overflowed? Adjust the coming week like a sound engineer balancing volume levels. This habit builds temporal awareness, the ability to feel your weeks instead of letting them vanish. Over time, you'll notice an internal alignment. Tasks connect to meaning, not just obligation. That's when you've shifted from time management to life composition. If you want a visual cue, use color codes in your planner: blue for body, yellow for brain, green for relationships, red for purpose. After a month, your calendar reveals patterns at a glance. Too much of one color means monotony, absence of another signals neglect. Your goal isn't equal colors, but harmony across the spectrum. A week that looks like a balanced palette instead of a single shade of busyness. Here's the takeaway. Your 4,000 weeks aren't only measured by what you accomplish, but by how evenly you inhabit yourself. The Four-Quadrant Framework turns time into a mirror that reflects your real priorities. When that reflection matches the person you want to be, life feels coherent. Projects succeed more easily, energy replenishes naturally, and decisions simplify because every yes or no clearly serves a quadrant. So this week, draw that square. Fill it honestly. Choose the 10% shift. Then act like a portfolio manager for your existence, reinvesting continuously in the areas that yield genuine fulfillment. Because no external system will ever organize your life's meaning for you. This framework simply hands you the lens to see where your weeks are going and the pen to start drafting where they'll go next. Once you begin living from all 4 quadrants, you stop trying to balance everything and start integrating everything. And that is how you turn awareness into architecture, how your finite weeks become a full, intentional life. Section 9, Living with Temporal Awareness. Here's where everything we've built starts to weave together, living with temporal awareness. Up to this point, we've talked about reclaiming control, redefining success, protecting boundaries, fueling yourself, and structuring life across quadrants. But awareness isn't something you write down once, it's something you practice every single week. Living with temporal awareness means regularly stepping back to notice how time is moving through you and how you're moving through it. It's about transforming time from a blur into a rhythm you can feel, measure, and intentionally adjust. Think of your life as a series of weeks, not vague some days. Each week is a mini-model of your life. How you live this week is, in truth, how you live your life. Same habits, same compromises, same joys. If you keep repeating one pattern for the next 2 years, you're building a future version of that pattern. Nothing more, nothing less. Temporal awareness helps you look at this repetition without judgment and decide if it's a loop worth continuing or one that needs rewriting. Start with a weekly reflection ritual. Every 7 days, ideally at the same time, pause and review how you actually spent your hours. You can write, use a planner, voice note, or even reflect mentally, but consistency is key. Ask 3 questions. What felt truly meaningful? What drained me unnecessarily? And what did I postpone that deserves attention? These are your checkpoints. You're not grading yourself, you're observing data. Awareness begins when you trade guilt for curiosity. This ritual does 2 things psychologically. First, it slows perceived time. When you review deliberately, your brain encodes experiences more richly, so the weeks stop blurring. Second, it builds self-trust. You start believing you'll revisit and refine your choices regularly, which makes each decision lighter. You no longer chase the illusion of perfect balance because you've scheduled ongoing correction. That's how pilots fly. Constant micro-adjustments keep them on course. Your weeks deserve that same navigation. Next, try setting week blocks. Instead of massive to-do lists, pick 3 life-moving goals that align with your larger vision. These aren't errands or maintenance chores, they're steps that nudge future change. Maybe preparing a proposal, spending quality time with someone important, or finishing chapter 1 of a project. Label them as Big 3 and block them on your calendar before everything else. Those 3 anchors define your week more than any number of finished microtasks ever will. By limiting focus to 3, you counteract attention fragmentation. It's cognitively proven that humans maintain deep focus effectively on only a few domains at once. Every extra priority dilutes intensity, but when your energy converges on 3 meaningful goals, progress compounds faster. Every small advance feels like alignment instead of exhaustion. And if you complete them early, the week becomes surplus time, not frantic catch-up. That feeling, ease paired with accomplishment, is what temporal awareness aims for. Now, let's add a balancing lens. While setting your week blocks, identify 2 categories to monitor equally: well-being and grind. Well-being covers rest, health, connection, reflection. Grind covers output, deadlines, creative pushes. Both need representation. If your week leans entirely toward grind, energy debt accumulates. Tilt fully toward well-being, momentum stalls. The art is oscillation. Push, recover, push again. Each Sunday, sketch a quick percentage split of how the previous week went. Over time, aim for roughly a 60% striving, 40% sustaining. That ratio keeps long-term performance intact without eroding joy. This discipline of balance fuels long-range perspective. When you zoom out monthly, patterns emerge. You'll see which quadrants shrink under stress and which sustain you naturally. That awareness allows strategic course corrections without emotional drama. High achievers often mistake exhaustion for failure, but often it's just misallocation. Seeing it on paper transforms anxiety into logistics. Move 3 hours from one area to another and regain equilibrium. Living with temporal awareness also means confronting imperfection daily. Some days, plans crumble. Tasks spill over. You'll miss your reflection window or ignore one of your big 3. Here's the rule: forgive fast, adjust immediately. The point isn't perfection, it's continuity. Missing one reflection week only becomes failure if you let shame extend it into a month. Treat awareness as elastic. You stretch, snap back, continue. That flexibility builds durability far more than rigid self-critique ever could. One profound part of temporal awareness is learning the discipline of letting things stay undone. Every week will offer more tasks than time, and that imbalance is permanent. Most stress comes from believing you can one day catch up. You can't. The list regenerates endlessly. Peace arrives when you understand that some things deserve to remain unfinished, that choosing what to ignore is as crucial as choosing what to pursue. When you intentionally leave low-impact items undone, you're practicing temporal minimalism, clearing mental bandwidth for what matters. A practical way to embody this is through what I call the done, held, worthless list. At week's end, divide your unfinished tasks into 3 columns. Done covers completion, celebrate those. Held lists meaningful tasks that move forward to next week because they align with long-term goals. Worthless contains leftover obligations that no longer hold purpose. Cross them out guilt-free. Watching that last column grow smaller each month is visual proof you're mastering time triage. You're training your brain to stop hoarding commitments like collectibles. Let's ground this in a story. A designer I mentored used to complain that time evaporated. Every week ended in frantic catch-up. We built a reflection practice together. Each Friday, she identified only 1 win and 1 unfinished intention, then planned 3 focused goals for the following week. After 2 months, she told me, I finally feel inside my weeks instead of chasing them. That's the shift, ownership of rhythm rather than reaction to circumstance. Another principle of temporal awareness is embracing impermanence. Every week passes regardless of outcome. You can't hold them, only inhabit them. When you accept that flow, pressure softens. You stop treating time as an enemy to control and start treating it as a collaborator guiding pace and perspective. The paradox is that accepting transience deepens presence. Knowing each week is temporary makes ordinary tasks feel sacred, conversations warmer, projects less panicked, rest more deserved. Try ending each week with a tiny ritual to honor that impermanence. Light a candle, write 1 sentence in a journal, or simply reflect during a slow breath, another week spent. This small acknowledgement transforms routine into gratitude. The brain anchors memory when emotion meets closure. That's how some ordinary weeks become vivid memories years later. They were marked, not blurred. When you live with temporal awareness, the clock stops being a source of stress and becomes a compass. You start noticing subtle cues: which days hum with engagement, which hours numb you, which moments stretch wider than they measure. You adjust accordingly. Over time, awareness evolves into instinct, choosing becomes natural. And in those moments when you pause midweek to realign, forgive a delay without judgment, or close your laptop knowing you've done enough, you're not just managing time, you're honoring life in motion. The truth of our 4,000 weeks isn't meant to terrify, it's meant to focus. Every reflection, every deliberate choice is one more act of stewardship over something irreplaceable. So when you finish watching this and look at the calendar ahead, don't ask how many tasks can I fit in. Ask how fully can I live inside these 7 days. Because temporal awareness isn't about control, it's about participation. It's about showing up week after week, awake to how finite and extraordinary this span really is. That's the quiet art of living time instead of losing it. Section 10, the philosophy of finite time. Every idea we've explored so far leads here, the quiet realization that time isn't a resource to manage, it's a reality to accept. The philosophy of finite time begins when you stop treating hours as obstacles and start treating them as your greatest teachers. Most productivity systems promise control over time, but control is an illusion. Accepting finitude doesn't mean giving up, it means waking up. It's the difference between fighting the tide and learning to surf it. When you picture your 4,000 weeks, most of them are already spoken for. Childhood, learning curves, recovery phases, sleep, daily maintenance. What's left for your deepest ambitions and most meaningful relationships might be only a few hundred weeks of true discretionary focus. That thought can feel crushing or clarifying, because once you grasp it, the trivia of daily irritation shrinks and what matters stands in sharper relief. Mortality isn't the enemy of meaning, it's what makes meaning possible. If time never ended, nothing would carry weight. Ancient philosophers wrestled with this paradox long before any modern planner existed. The Stoics, especially thinkers like Seneca, taught that awareness of mortality is the foundation of serenity. They called it memento mori, remember you must die. It wasn't meant to darken life, but to illuminate it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that we should live each day as if it were a complete life in itself, not rehearsal for some future part. Existential philosophers picked up the same thread centuries later, arguing that freedom begins when you acknowledge limits. You can't direct infinite time, but you can choose how to shape the slice you're given. That choice defines everything. Most people treat time as backdrop, a neutral canvas on which life happens. But time is also sculptor. It shapes identity with each passing week. Every yes carves a groove, every no preserves potential. The philosophy of finite time invites you to collaborate with that sculptor instead of ignoring it, to see each decision as a chisel stroke that either clarifies or clouds the form of your life. It also means trading the comfort of infinite postponement for the clarity of commitment. When you accept you can't do or be everything, you're finally free to choose deliberately. The anxiety of missed opportunities turns into peace because you realize you were never meant to attend every possible future, only the few that fit your purpose. That's the wisdom behind minimalism and essentialism. Constraint breeds coherence. Your limited weeks aren't a prison, they are a frame giving shape to art. We resist this because finitude feels like loss. Admitting we have limits touches the same fear as mortality itself. It whispers that time is slipping away and nothing lasts. But that's precisely why attention is sacred. Knowing moments vanish compels you to inhabit them more fully. When you hold a friend's laughter or watch a sunset knowing it won't repeat, you're not diminished, you're present. Awareness of impermanence transforms ordinary scenes into treasures. So how does this philosophy translate into daily life? First, redefine ambition as stewardship. Instead of chasing more, focus on tending well to what you already hold, your skills, relationships, body, purpose. Ask not how can I expand everything, but how can I care for what exists more deeply. Stewardship builds longevity where expansion often creates fragility. Second, practice what the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, periodically imagining potential losses, not for pessimism but for gratitude. Envision the absence of what you love and feel renewed urgency to appreciate it now. Gratitude at that depth rewires time from countdown to gift. Another practice is selective surrender. You can't master the whole schedule, but you can master how you meet interruptions. When things derail, remember, unpredictability isn't theft, it's the price of being alive. Flowing with it converts frustration into adaptability, the mature form of productivity. Time doesn't owe you steadiness. It offers constant chance to recalibrate meaning. Here's a simple weekly reflection to anchor this mindset. At the end of each week, write one sentence beginning with "I gave my time to." Fill it honestly. If the answer aligns with values, rest easy. If not, adjust the next 7 days. You just enacted philosophy without jargon, living with continuous awareness of trade-offs and the humility to refine them. Over time, this orientation changes identity. You stop calling yourself busy and start describing yourself as present. You become less obsessed with optimizing minutes and more interested in enriching them. The paradox unfolds the moment you surrender the fantasy of infinite time. You feel like you have more of it. Every activity becomes deliberate. Distractions lose their seduction because they no longer fit within your precious frame. Ultimately, the philosophy of finite time isn't grim, it's liberating. It asks you to stop negotiating with reality and start collaborating with it. To see mortality not as a deadline but as design. The finite makes your passions urgent, your love poignant, your work intentional. You begin living each week not as something to spend easily, but as something to sculpt carefully into memory. So as you reach this point, breathe and consider. 4,000 weeks translated into heartbeats, conversations, late-night ideas, shared meals, small acts of courage. Each one finite, yet infinite in impact when met with attention. The goal isn't to stretch time, it's to deepen it. To live with urgency but without panic, with purpose but without burnout. This is your invitation to stop counting weeks and start weighting them. To measure a good life not by duration but by density of meaning. Write your philosophy of finite time in action. Love quickly, rest deeply, create bravely, and let trivial urgency pass by like weather. That's not resignation, it's mastery. Because once you accept everything ends, you're finally free to begin living fully. The 4,000-week choice. You've walked through the entire landscape of time, urgency, awareness, planning, self-care, and purpose. You've stepped off the urgency treadmill and into a system that turns fragments of effort into a coherent, balanced life design. Now we arrive at the final crossroad, what you'll actually do with the 4,000 weeks you have. Because knowing all this changes nothing until you decide to live differently. Every choice from here is a vote for how your life unfolds. Think of everything you've learned as one continuous transformation. It began with awareness, the shock that time isn't endless, that busyness can't buy meaning. From there came boundaries, the courage to define limits as an act of alignment rather than fear. Then balance, the understanding that self-care isn't escape, but infrastructure. And finally, purpose, the invisible thread tying every hour to something larger than comfort or speed. Awareness showed you what's happening. Boundaries protected your energy. Balance sustained your momentum. Purpose gives direction to each future week. If there's one truth to hold tightly, it's this. You don't find time for what matters, you claim it. Waiting for space to appear is how decades vanish quietly. The life you want won't announce itself with perfect conditions. It starts the moment you stop postponing. Every meaningful project, relationship, and act of growth starts as an interruption to something less important. You can either guard the status quo or guard possibility, but never both. Picture standing at the edge of your remaining weeks like a horizon stretched out before you. The kind are the ones already spent, some brilliant, some wasted, all non-refundable. Ahead are 3,000, maybe fewer, sitting in your invisible account. They don't arrive automatically filled with meaning, they start blank. The deposit happens through attention. A week half lived by autopilot and a week lived intentionally both last 7 days. One simply registers deeper, carving memory instead of blur. That's the difference between existing in time and inhabiting it. The system we've built is your compass for that horizon. The Four-Quadrant Framework keeps your life whole across body, mind, relationships, and purpose. The week blocks transform abstract goals into concrete rhythm, and temporal awareness anchors it all, your ritual of reflection that turns regret into refinement. But remember, no framework works unless you use it when everything around you screams for the old way. The test will come on ordinary Thursdays when urgency knocks at the door. Will you drift or will you direct? Let this final reflection settle in. The metric of a good life isn't how many tasks you complete, but how intentionally you live the moments you'll never repeat. Fulfillment isn't a finish line, it's the cumulative evidence that your attention went where your values live. When people look back at meaningful years, they rarely remember efficiency. They remember presence. The quiet breakfast conversations, the genuine laughter, the courage to rest, the focus to create something true. Those moments are the dividends of conscious weeks. So here's your next step. Choose one quadrant: body, brain, relationships, or purpose, and act on it today. Just one small recalibration, a walk, a call, a notebook page, a boundary declared. That single act flips theory into motion. Then repeat it next week and the next until intention becomes reflex. Because transformation isn't grand, it's granular. Life changes not in years but in chosen hours. From this moment forward, every yes and every no will sculpt the story of your remaining 4,000 weeks. There's no need for panic, the clock was always moving. The difference now is you're awake to it. Waking up was the real goal all along, to see time not as pressure, but as partnership. Your weeks are numbered. That's not the tragedy, it's the invitation. Make them count deliberately. Love and create and rest with equivalent courage. Let important things happen on purpose, not by accident. You already have enough time, you just can't afford to misplace it anymore. And if you ever drift back into autopilot, remember this: your life's meaning isn't hiding in the distance. It's right here in the texture of the week you're living. Each sunrise is another blank square waiting to be filled with what matters most. Fill it well, protect it fiercely, and let unnecessary noise fade, because the truth is simple: you won't get another set of 4,000 weeks. But that's exactly what makes this span extraordinary. Awareness doesn't shorten it, it deepens it. So close this video, take a breath, and make one deliberate choice. Open your calendar right now and give one block of time to something that belongs to your Four-Quadrant Life Framework: body, brain, relationships, or purpose. That act, simple and grounded, is how you start living the philosophy of finite time, not just understanding it. Awareness turns into architecture, motion into meaning. Subscribe if you want more tools to keep building that architecture, a life that lasts in depth, even if it can't last forever. Your 4,000 weeks begin again the moment you decide to use this one differently.